Well, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Show. If you hadn't seen episode 24, go back and watch episode 24. It's with Dr. Stephen Greer. And we had a phenomenal talk about UAPs, UFOs, extraterrestrial life, most importantly, advanced technologies and some government conspiracy. I don't even want to use it for conspiracy, some shadow government efforts to keep that information from us. It's an incredible episode. Dr. Greer came back on a TRS, the Resilient Show special, talked about some Senate hearings, and now we have him back in the studio today to talk about so many things that he's been working on this past year and things that are going on in our government right now that we need to, it's very important for everyone to know.
Yes.
So again, if you didn't see the Resilient Show episode 24, go back and watch it. And in the meantime, I am going to do an introduction, kind of a continuing introduction of who Dr. Greer is for you guys. So Dr. Greer is a retired medical physician and a leading authority on UFO, UAPs, advanced technologies, and extraterrestrial intelligence. He founded the Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the CSETI, in 1990, and the Disclosure Project in 1993, both dedicated to uncovering and sharing information about UFOs and advanced energy technologies. Dr. Greer has briefed every U.S. president since George H.W. Bush on these critical issues. His books and documentaries, including Serious and Unacknowledged, have reached and informed millions of people worldwide, shedding light on hidden technologies and classified government programs. His work has been instrumental in bringing these topics to public attention. In the past few years, Dr. Greer has worked with Congress to allow whistleblowers to safely come forward and expose elements of corruption and secret agendas by a shadow government that has hidden advanced technologies from the public and even our own government. Dr. Greer, I'm super excited to have you back.
Good to be back. And
welcome.
by the way, we have a new documentary, Battle for Disclosure, that just came out a couple months ago.
Where did it hit?
Oh, it's on Amazon. It's everywhere. But
okay.
Yeah. I mean, and we have 2 new books that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we are. And you have them here with you, right?
I do. We'll get into that.
What are the titles again?
Well, one is the president's briefing document that we've redacted for the public. It's called the Disclosure Project Briefing Document 2025. So I've done one of these for every president, not since George H.W. Bush Clinton.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So we'll talk about the Clinton era and what was called Team Red.
Okay.
That was stood up to try to fix this problem that got decimated. But this is the most recent. It's redacted for sensitive information. And then we have another book on disclosure that is all the crash retrieval in major cases. But it's like a coffee table art book. It's all illustrated. But every case in there are firsthand witnesses and whistleblowers that are named. And it's a full color like art book, but it's about those cases. So it's great to flip through. So those just came out this week.
Okay. We definitely want to talk about those. You've done a tremendous amount of media podcasts like this. You've been out. I mean, we talked to you had one or multiple episodes of Joe Rogan.
And Patrick Bet-David, been great to be on.
Sean Ryan
show. Yeah.
You've been on a lot of shows, and the Joe Rogan episode, they had to take it down.
Yes. Well, in order to get the deal with Spotify, they had to take certain things out of the lineup. Mine was one of them.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. I
mean,
money is ultimately the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. It can be good, but it can be corrupted. It's fungible. So, and what I found is that many times between blackmail and threats and financial inducements, people can be made to do almost anything. It's one of the reasons why I always tell people close to the president and Congress I deal with, 3 things you got to have. When I was in France, I called it ICI, like here. Intelligence, to understand all this, complicated. Courage to do the right thing, because you're going to go through the mother of all buzzsaws with this. And number 3, integrity. So you can't be corrupted. Now, getting those 3 things together in leaders of any kind is difficult. The reason I love guys like you and the people I work with who Green Berets and other Delta Force and Special Forces folks who've been involved with these projects who are coming forward is that they actually have the courage to do the right thing. But in Washington and in the corporate C-suites and in the political class, That's rare as hen's teeth, my friend. And that's the reason the situation is what it is. There has not been the requisite intelligence gathering, courage, and integrity to do the right thing. Otherwise, this could have been resolved back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, our audience loved episode 24. They loved you. It's in the top 3 performing episodes that we had this year. And it was a lot of feedback, a lot of feedback, and people were just really intrigued. There's a lot more questions, and part of today's discussion includes some of the questions that some of our audience had. And what I loved about it is the UFO thing can kind of be clickbait, right? So it wasn't just about the UFOs and the extraterrestrials. People asking about what you're most passionate about. Advanced technologies that would improve life for all of mankind, and the shadow government that has kept that from reaching the civilian population, and what are the motives behind it, and all those things. So those are the things that I think I want to dive further into. I know we want to start off with a visual aid that you brought with you about the deep state. Who the deep state is. We hear deep state all the time.
We do. And the reason
what is the deep state? So
the reason I want this, and we can put it up on the screen for folks, we created a couple of days ago, because what I'm hearing is that people are conflating deep state with just lawfare and corrupt people in various agencies.
Right.
And just a little history lesson. Richard Nixon, who was a Republican, weaponized the Department of Justice and IRS against his opponents. This has been going on for decades, right? I mean, power can be corrupting. So that aspect of the deep state is a big problem, for sure, because it's corruption of our sacred institutions for our, republic, and the violation of the rule of law is never a good thing. But I'm talking about what really. Let's go back to Senator Inouye, Democrat. Liberal, Hawaii, during Iran-Contra. And we have a clip, and he says, there's a secret government, a shadow government, with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's above the law and free from the law itself. Now, this is not a conspiracy theorist. And he later confirmed to an intern who later became an attorney for my Disclosure Project group that, in fact, he knew that involved, and the crown jewel of that deep state was the UFO UAP issue and the constellation of technologies and programs associated with it. If Doge wants to know where 8 to 20 trillion, somewhere in that range, have gone, look into this. We know where it is, and we know how it's done. So I think Mr. Musk would be well advised to look into this, although right now he doesn't know about it, to my knowledge. In fact, he was just on Joe Rogan saying Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop don't have anything like this, but they do. Because they have whistleblowers that you'll see have been working in those facilities. Some of them underneath the surface of the ground with man-made UFOs and extraterrestrial ones that they reverse engineer, and poof, they come out with something that looks like a UFO.
And they're reverse engineering from crash site retrieval.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. But a little more complicated. We can unpack that in a minute. But so the deep state, as I'm calling it, back in 2015, 10 years ago in Washington, I gave a lecture, and it ended up having several million people see it. It was called UFOs and the Deep National Security State. So the whole concept of deep state, but with the description of it is a transnational corrupt organization. So think of a mafia,
right?
That's corrupt. I mean, and has power not just here but around the world, and their power is derived from the extraordinary technologies they have. Because, if you have the superior technology, you win, usually. Eventually, David can sling Goliath, right? But it's a big problem for the constitutional government of the United States, the United Kingdom. I've been dealing with senior people in other countries, and they're in the same conundrum. So what I really like to focus on here with this graphic, you can look at it, but it's like there's this criminal transnational organization that transcends. I call it transnational because it's not international. Right. What you think between the government of the UK and Russia or whatever, it transcends the normal systems and operates sort of atop them or subterranean beneath them. How you
no one government's leading it.
No, because this entity is its own entity.
Okay.
And they view the world as their oyster. They do what they want to do. And I know members of it. I've met with members of it. And they're your ultimate totalitarian, global, let's control everything, right? Now, they don't really care about the Constitution of the United States or any other country. They do what they want to do when they want to do it. And the world is their oyster. That's their mindset. I call them MOTUs, masters of the universe. They have this mindset. Very, very powerful interest. And we're not talking, a few $100 billion. We're talking in the aggregate globally in the hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets, for reasons we'll get into in a minute. So it transects all of these. So you have atop this empire, the super advanced technologies that have been based on studying interstellar vehicles, but also based on some classified research done in the 20s, 30s, 40s. We have a movie called The Lost Century, and it unpacks 100 years of a lost century of technology and science that I recommend people see. And you can see it for free on Tubi or anywhere, So the other big problem is with that group, they have infiltrated, if you look at this, all the key government agencies. So they have NOCs, let's call them a non-official cover. Mm-hmm. So by day, someone is a national security editor in a media outfit. They're actually on the payroll of this group clandestinely. I know who they are, many of them, how it works. And it's a corrupting influence. You have every agency that's key in the national security infiltrated with these elements. You have people in the banking sector, the energy sector, et cetera, and so on. And this is why the chart was as inclusive as you could fit on a sheet of paper to go through all those elements. For example, and you have to remember whether it's in an aerospace contractor with special projects or programs, or Chase Manhattan Bank, right? J.P. Morgan Chase. Sure. Back when it was Chase Manhattan, that was David Rockefeller, whose brother Lawrence was on my team. Another whole story. So the way this works is a huge conglomerate of very powerful interests that want to control the world's direction. Democracy be damned, the law be damned. But the issue of the UAP issue is the crown jewel of that whole system because it is so powerful in what the technologies are and what they can do. So we're all talking about AI. Well, they have generations of that in this covert program that are already 20, 30 years beyond what you're hearing about in the news. Same thing with energy and propulsion systems. Same thing with surveillance systems. Same thing for remote influencing systems like the Havana syndrome stuff you're hearing about. That's Mickey Mouse stuff from the 70s, 80s, old clunky technologies that affect consciousness and health. They have much more advanced systems. So this is a group, an unchecked group, and this is the danger. Over here in Arizona, years ago in the 90s, I met with Senator Barry Goldwater, and he never was read into this, even though he was presidential, candidate, 64, lost. But he told me that he was blocked from getting any information on it, even though he was one of the most senior conservative pro-military guys in the U.S. Senate in the 60s and 70s, right? So it really, this is the other mistake. People think this is based on your technical position. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're the POTUS, you're president, or you're the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or you're the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, or whatever, or you're chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. That doesn't mean you have any knowledge on this. This is, because it's completely an unconstitutional operation. The ones who do know have been read in because they were known to be corruptible. So there are. So that I briefed a CI director who had no knowledge. Mm-hmm. And then there are others that I know have been read in and involved in those old, what are called legacy programs, and were involved in criminal activities. U.S.
taxpayer dollars are getting funneled into these programs.
Correct. And this is the other part of this.
Into a transnational organization, it's not a shadow government like U.S. program, it's a transnational.
But on this chart is also the drug trade, human trafficking trade, oil and energy trade, banking. Now, this gets to be a big problem for people like Mr. Cash, the new FBI director, or Pam Bondi, because what they're going to have to do, if they're really going to take on the part of the deep state that matters, right? I'm not talking, political points here. I'm talking about what's really going to benefit the United States of America. And by extension, because the United States leads the world, and I think will eventually lead the world spiritually as well. I think that this is the ground zero for these operations, although they're scattered all over the world. So this pattern of a group that's unelected and unappointed, that has that kind of power, but has operatives, let's call them, non-official cover at NOx in all these sectors. Take that to the UK, take it to France, take it to Germany, Italy, to my knowledge, probably Russia and China. They don't really care about those geopolitical boundaries. So one of the first things I did when I was in the SCIF, the Secure Compartment Information Facility for Senate Intelligence Committee a little over 3 years ago, when they asked me to come in and help them investigate this, I said, you see that map up on the wall? It's a map of the world. Erase every geopolitical line, the line between Canada, US, Mongolia, and China, whatever, just erase it. They operate with alacrity and without limitations across those boundaries. How? Because they have technologies to totally evade any detection. Okay, so when you see one of these UFOs or UAPs, and they're moving at a couple 100,000 miles per hour, a lot of those are hours. Now people go, it can't be. And I remember when David Fravor, the F-18 Hornet pilot, after that video footage from California came out, it was taken in 2004, where our Navy jets were chasing, you can put this footage up, this UFO and an object called the Tic Tac. I talked to David Fravor several years ago, and I said, my friend, that came from the Lockheed Skunk Works. He said, oh, no way. Now, to his defense, he was a top, Navy pilot, and then he left the Navy and was working for an aerospace defense contractor. He said, this can't be. There's no way we humans have this. I said, well, yeah, we do. Now, apparently a Lockheed executive off the record confirmed to him, yes, this was one of ours. So he's changed his tune. So this is going to get unpacked. But Chad, I'll tell you, the shock of this to people in power, whether you're a president or Senate or the head of state in the United Kingdom or the Five Eyes countries, the 5 intelligence cooperative countries are called Five Eyes, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and America, United States. Those are the Five Eyes. None of those folks, and I briefed the Minister of Defense of Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, all of them except New Zealand. And same thing with their senior intelligence folks, MI6, others. They don't know anything. Most of the time. Sometimes they do, and in which case they're very hostile to me bringing the issue up. And I go, that one is dirty. I can tell by the body language.
By the way they react to it.
Yes.
Well, any organization, a nonprofit, a business, a small business, a government, a shadow government, a cult, any organization or group has a mission.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. I mean, whether they have it written in a mission statement or a vision statement, there's always a mission. There's always a goal.
Yeah.
What would be the mission of this group?
2 things. The slow moving out of certain technologies that allow for surveillance and control. We call it the internet and smartphones. Now, what people don't realize is that those systems allow keystroke by keystroke access to everyone on planet Earth to this group. There is no encryption they can't go around. Number 1, hello, Apple, are you listening? 2, I just had my phone completely hacked. And I have an iPhone.
Yeah.
And it's up to date, encrypted, forget it. So the other part of it is that they have the ability to corrupt people in key points. So there are all these vast conspiracy theories that are nonsense.
But for what? Like, what's the overall goal? Like, what's
control?
Control.
They want to eventually they want to bring all this out, but within the context of 2 false narratives. One is that there's a threat from outer space that we have to unite the world around in the ultimate battle.
This is a globalist agenda. It's a unifying one world order,
Well, yes, and those are kind of cliche, but there are people who want world peace and think globally, but they're not totalitarian globalists. So I make a distinction. I work with all spectrum across the aisle globally. But what I find is that the ones who are the hardcore totalitarian oriented, authoritarian, totalitarian, they're the ones who control that organization. It's shifting. There is shifting going on in it. But their goal is to bring this out eventually after they're sure they have controlled everyone's social engineering, let's call it. 9/11 was some social engineering, PSYOP. It was. I know who did it, why they did it, how they did it. Number 2, COVID, PSYOP. It was really to see if they could lock down the planet, control everyone. And they did. The big one is the one coming imminently. And that's the hoax, a threat from outer space to unite the world in a dystopian, endless war and battle, opposite of what the president is talking about with the golden age. This would be the darkest age. It's a dystopian, insane agenda. And that is their overarching long agenda that was hatched around 1953, 54.
Well, see, 2 months ago, we had all the UFO, UAP activity over New Jersey.
Yes.
Is that like, would you say that's part of this? Is it a
total
to see how we're going to react to it?
Yes. It was all ours.
Okay.
It was all, they knew.
When you say ours, the United States government or the
transnational
group?
Yeah. So the U.S. government have elements. So let's, for example, let's take my uncle worked for Northrop Grumman for his whole life.
Well, first of all, I'll say this. I don't believe for 1 minute that the Pentagon spokesperson and the White House did not know that those were ours. I don't believe that. Am I wrong?
Well, who knows what the previous administration knew.
Right.
Now, the current administration spokeswoman misspoke about it.
Okay.
Because the FAA did not have all those on their registry. I talked to a lieutenant general who I also saw recently at Mar-a-Lago, and he said absolutely that they were unknowns to the legal government of the United States. So there's been some misinformation provided to the president on that.
Why would if we had those type of whatever they were flying over in our airspace, why didn't the Pentagon react like defensively?
Well, yeah,
why wouldn't we? If we really didn't know what they were, why wouldn't we react defensively?
Well, I think a lot of it was that they were not really sure whose it was and what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, you just don't go and blow things out of the sky over populated areas in suburban New Jersey or elsewhere. But, you know, the fact is none of them were alien.
What were they?
They're part of this organization. So some of them were conventional drones.
Okay.
Some were people putting things up because it became a media zeitgeist.
Sure, yeah.
So that's the social engineering PSYOP part. Then everyone got into a panic about it, right? Which is another part of a psychological warfare operation. And then the other part of it was that there were some weird, let's just call it, you know, at the CIA, it's called WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic. That is what they call it.
The orbs?
The orbs, strange things like that. We have all that capability.
What are the orbs? I'm asking.
They're like
person.
Intelligently controlled plasmas.
Okay. Are they manned?
No, most of them not. If it's a solid sphere, it can be, but most of the ones that are energetic, no, they're not.
What is the purpose of them?
And we know how to create those.
What are the purpose of them? Are there
deceptive indication and warning, false flag?
Okay.
Yeah. In the Pentagon, the word deceptive indication and warning is the military speak for a false flag operation. And you set up this. So now the reason it was happening is more interesting. There were a team of whistleblowers who are going to come forward from 6 different black sites.
Explain black site for those listening.
A black site is an unacknowledged site where there are clandestine, covert, either corporate or military operations going on. And we have in our archive, hey, if you guys want to go to Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, dpiarchive.com. It's free. We've scanned in all this. So there's a map in there with 150 some black sites or sites where they have retrieved these ET craft or where there's current operations. And I've been in a number of them. And shortly before I was almost killed 16 months ago, I was hovering in a helicopter by one of these whistleblowers over the underground opening for the Lockheed Skunk Works out in the desert. And so those facilities have, it's a little bit, one of them's called the Ant Hill, which is east of Edwards. You go in there and it connects to an underground, what are called STIFs, subterranean facilities.
Right.
Some people call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases, but usually they're called STIFs. And it connects way out into the desert. And you can connect from those sites, say Area 51,
all underground,
all underground, Dugway Proving Grounds. These are all on a map. So I have debriefed over the years 760 some whistleblowers who've been in these operations. The summary of all that is in this archive, dpiarchive.com, and it's 35 years of work.
You have it mapped out, like you can see a map?
Yep. There's a map you can pull up. There's a list, and there's a little brief summary of what's operational there or was.
Yeah, I'll be checking that out myself.
Yeah, it's
I'm
cool.
Super interested. Yeah,
it's in the briefing document for the new president and Congress. But none of that does any good unless we take one more step, and that is authorize an operation to get these under control. So this covert group, they really want to have a global control, but based not on a golden age of peace and prosperity, let's say. Instead, they want to control people through fear. Because this is what demagogues and evil people do. I mean, all through history.
This is where Project Bluebeam is a part of, like, that's kind of the end game for this.
Yeah, that was not actually a legit name for the code. I know a lot of the code.
But the concept of Project Bluebeam is like the end game of this, like create a image of an alien invasion or extraterrestrial invasion that creates a panic and brings the world together.
Yeah, and here's a news flash. We've already done it. Mm-hmm. You know, I like telling this story, talking to my youngest daughter's first grade class in North Carolina 30 years ago.
Okay.
And the teacher said, come in, and, I'm working full time as an emergency and trauma and all that, but I started getting involved with this, right? And I think I had been on Larry King Live or something by then. And she said, we want you to talk. I said, okay, little 6-year-olds. The first question out of the mouth of the babes was, well, Dr. Greer, aren't you afraid they're going to abduct you? I said, oh, no, those are not the ETs doing that. That's a covert psychological warfare operation. I know who's doing it, how they're doing it. And it was like you could hear a pin dropping with these kids. What? So if you study ufology,
Brian's scared the heck out of these kids there.
Yeah, I said, these are your very bad actors masquerading. So
they're all in therapy now. They're all adults in therapy now.
My poor daughters.
Man, one time when Dr. Greer came to my school.
Yeah, I hear from some of these kids sometimes. I have 4 daughters, and of course I had to grow up with this mayhem, but God bless them. 12 grandkids. But
wow, congratulations. That's awesome.
Go forth and multiply. So we did. But I think that what people need to understand is that October 1954, important date, the top scientists at the Naval Research Labs in Washington, Rick Foch, good friend of mine, he was in the vault that had papers showing that we had mastered what is called gravity control. It's called electromagnetogravitics. Basically, it's a very advanced area of physics where you can cause the mass of an object like this can to go to 0, and you can float it anywhere. And if you take it a little further, it will disappear out of space-time, teleport to another point. So those technologies were really mastered by 1954, October. I'll give you the date. So we began to build clandestinely things that look a lot like an ET, extraterrestrial interstellar vehicle, but they're man-made. So some of the early ones we have in this book, what's called the ARV, Alien Reproduction Vehicle. And it was built, if you went into the interior of it, the witness was a guy who was in there and saw it at an air show at Norton Air Force Base in 1988. It was an antique. It had been around for about 30 years, since the late 50s. And in the interior, all the controls were from the Mercury capsule era of the late 50s, early 60s. So people, whenever they see these objects, will go, wow, I saw an alien. I said, wait, give me the details. Mm. So if there's seams, sections, rivets, parts, that's not interstellar. They're seamless. And how they're made, we don't probably have time for it. We know how they're made. But you're not digging up metal ore and smelting it and soldering it together.
Yeah.
Now, the man-made ones have become so sophisticated, as Jake Barber recently said, they're virtually indistinguishable from the ET ones. Because remember, this isn't 1958. This is 2025. Mm-hmm. So now visualize trillions of dollars of our money going into these projects, refining and refining and refining the tech.
It's reverse engineering and testing
and better and better and better and better. But also, I will say this, kudos to the scientists I've met who work in those programs. Highest IQ people I've ever met are in these covert programs, usually not government, usually corporate. And although they're under contract, maybe with the agency, or they're under contract with some other entity. And I know who these guys are. They're on our list of people to be interrogated by law enforcement.
I was speaking in Roswell, New Mexico, at Church on the Move, incredible pastor Troy there, and they do every year they do a 4th of July event.
Oh yeah,
that's like the light show. It's worth traveling there to go see. I think this year they're going to have like 200-something thousand drones do this light show. It's incredible. So I'll be speaking there again this yeyear. But while I was there, I was like, I want to speak to someone, like some elderly person that was alive when this happened. And I want to know what the locals, because, in the military, like, what do the locals say? So I sat down with this man, and he said, what actually happened there was, it was a reverse engineering project. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you laugh, you're going to hell. They said that there was a hospital with Down syndrome people, like orphans, and they were taking these Down syndrome kids and putting them in this reverse engineering craft, and one of those crashed, and so it came out, and then they shut it down because they didn't want to get out. The government was putting Down syndrome kids and telling them they were astronauts and letting them fly some reverse engineered UFO, and that's what the locals in this area claim.
Well, it's a mixed picture. I dealt with some people before they died who were actually there when they retrieved.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's not quite accurate. And
did you laugh? They're laughing back there.
Yeah.
And so, hell,
but sorry. I will say they have many of these craft have people on board, and the ones that were early on being used to stage alien abductions and cattle mutilations, those did have usually small-statured men with certain deformities, and then they would make them look like an alien. We have an Air Force Office of Special Investigations man who worked those programs. He told us about that. And he knew that those were being used to stage this scary stuff. Because here, in order to have a war of that magnitude, where it's War of the Worlds, right? It's totally a hoax. You've got to brainwash the populace to be afraid of something. But you've also got to convince your world leaders eventually of an common alien threat. Their goal would be to unite the world, but not in a golden age of peace and prosperity, as I said, but to unite it in an endless cycle of conflict and war and fear, through which they can seize power, and I will add, suspend our freedoms and liberties. That's their goal. And that goal, that purpose was concocted in the mid-50s. Eisenhower was not in favor of that. President Eisenhower, that's why they pushed him out. So about 1957 to 60, somewhere in there, the President of the United States was decapitated. Basically, you're no longer ahead of this. And that's when it all went sideways. So there has been because then there's been no accountability, no control. They do what they want. George H.W. Bush was part of the committee dealing with this, and Mr. Cheney. They were read in, but
there's probably a conflict of interest there. Yeah. You get Cheney involved.
Well, he's been very involved since the 70s.
Right.
Yeah. So we know who's involved with these and operations. Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, very much involved since way back. He was deputy director of CIA and head of the National Security Agency. Now he went on to the board of Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC.
These are all people involved in the military-industrial complexes as well.
Who are specifically are part of this operation. So the question becomes, what's the end game here? What we're trying to do, our mission statement.
Right.
Our mission statement is not to get a pound of flesh for all the horrific things that have happened in the last 70 years. Our purpose is to get this under proper control and oversight and move forward with a whole new golden era.
Because there's a lot of good things that come from.
Oh my God.
I mean, you're talking
medical.
The last episode we did, at episode 24, we talked about 0 point energy and what that could bring to society, and global peace and prosperity and health.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine whatever you drive. I used to have a Raptor. So, you have that thing running. You have 1,000 horsepower electromagnetic engine and alternator, and it never has to be plugged in. Where's the energy coming from? This quantum vacuum 0 point field, which was proven it was postulated in the 30s and proven in 1950s by Professor Casimir. So this is solid science and physics. Now, if you go to MIT or Harvard, they'll say, we don't have anything like that. Well, not that you know about in academia, right? But the people who work on these projects that are very covert, they have it. But see, this is one of the things Patrick David said to me on a show a couple weeks ago was, you can't let those out because of the interest in oil, gas, coal. I said, no, wait. We've had 200 years of industrial revolution. But if I were to wiggle my nose like Bewitched and manifest one of those things right here, and we started mass manufacturing it by the millions, it would take 15 years from right now.
That's a huge transition to power.
You're not talking about an app you download, right? You're talking about heavy industry.
Yeah.
So you have to retool. Let's take automobiles. There's 1.5 billion motor vehicles on the road. We make 100 million a year. If it all got retooled tomorrow, it'd be 15 years to change that industrial stock. Same thing for your house. Same for industry.
But the petro industry as a whole is worth $1,000 trillion, right? So that's the threat, right? If you introduce the technology that omits
and most of it offshore, right? Most of it offshore. So that's one of the big problems, is that you have to penetrate. People forget that Aramco and the Saudi royal family was pretty much set up after World War II by OSS and the CIA. Go look it up. So the energy sector is very much integrated into the secrecy around this. So that's the second big reason, is that we can let the IT technologies out so we can spy on everybody. By the way, when you say I agree to all these tech companies, you're giving them carte blanche and they're monitoring everything.
Sure.
And, I have a whistleblower right now who was on with the National Security Agency, who was in meetings with the senior C-suite people in a major tech company where that was all being set up. So, people are very naive about the fact that there's any real privacy there. But I think that the bigger agenda would be, how do we bring these other technologies out? Well, we bring them out once we have enough control over the populace. So that's the deep state I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just your political opponents who have done nasty things. I mean, that's bad. And I decry it. I say it's so completely inappropriate to use institutions of the U.S. government for partisan political reasons or corrupt reasons. But this is the granddaddy. No one's got their eye on this ball, Chad. And this is the one that's going to really come to haunt us if we don't get it under control fairly soon, for some reasons I can share in a little bit. But
when you look at that deep state, clearly needs funding. The U.S. taxpayer dollar seems to fund everything. We're finding out now around the world. Pentagon audits fail every year.
7 now.
Yeah. So how does those Pentagon audits and the failure of those audits, how does that connect to this?
Great question, because here's the big problem. Doge and Mr. Musk and those guys, 50 billion here, 60 billion there, but
this is trillions.
It's chump change, man. I mean, it's nothing. The big money is in these other operations that are not on their radar.
Is that going to be in the Pentagon budget? Is that where they can find it?
It's in multiple budgets. So if you go back even to Catherine Austin Fitts, who during the George H.W. Bush's administration, they were trying to root out exactly what they're doing now, fraud and corruption. She found out there were black projects siphoning money out of HUD, housing and urban development. So,
because that's the thing about money, you can always, when it comes to money, you can always, it's fungible. Yes, but you could always trace it, right? Now it could stop somewhere and you can run in a wall.
Well, here's the problem.
Then you know where it stops.
I talked to a KPMG auditor who was looking at my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman.
What? Say, okay.
Yeah, my uncle had his whole career at Northrop Grumman, a big aerospace contractor. And he said they got to a certain level and then they were told, you don't have the clearance and you don't have a need to know.
At least you know where it stops.
Take our word for it. Yeah. So the way this works, I like to make things very graphic for people because otherwise it's too theoretical. Mm-hmm. You have a B-2 stealth bomber, right? Now they're going to build a government, us, $2 billion for that critter. It costs maybe $150 million to make. The rest of the money's going out the back door into these covert engineering and other projects. The lion's share of it. I know someone who worked for SAIC, Science Application, and she was in an office that did nothing but gin up false reports to the Congress and government, and they were getting millions of dollars coming into that office. They weren't doing anything. It was all a masquerade and fraud, and it was all going out the back door into these operations. So if you're really going to have...
So on paper, it looks legit.
It absolutely looks...
It checks out.
It checks, but when you drill down on a really hard audit, it's going to fail because where did it actually go? Mm-hmm. Now, good luck penetrating that. The way to do it, if you're taking it from just what you can get as an official with the U.S. government, you're going to hit this black lead ceiling, right? But if you have whistleblowers who have been in the system and say, "Oh, well, this is what we're doing." See, what I'm trying to do is connect those two things.
How many dollars are we talking? Like in an annual budget, how many dollars?
It's in the hundreds of billions.
Hundreds of billions.
Every bit of it. But that's not their main source of funding. So there's the U.S. government. There are other governments that have similar problems.
Sure.
Then you have the global drug trade. You have human trafficking, which we'll talk about.
So those global drug trade and human trafficking is funding?
Yes, they're tied into this. In fact, one of the black sites I've been to is where they bring in people who are used in human experiments from very desperate, poor countries. And we know where they're transshipped from. And some are carried conventionally, some are carried on these big man-made UFOs. We have a picture of one that Michael Herrera's, when he came, the Marine who came across that great big 300-foot diameter craft. Mm. We can put that up, the Herrera case, and show us, I'm describing it. That was
they're abducting, which is tied to extraterrestrial word, but the governments or this trans government or trans global organization is abducting human beings from other countries and bringing them for experiments.
Yeah, and they're used in all kinds of different programs. And one is this kind of remote viewing P3 psionic program that we recently got exposed by Jake Barber and his associates.
Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that?
I've known him for a couple of years, but the point I'm making is that that's the tip of a huge iceberg.
Right.
What else are they doing? But all of these create a revenue stream. Two people who were very close to George H.W. Bush in 1997, it was the day after we did the 1997 offsite congressional briefings. So we had a Westin Hotel in Georgetown. Members of Congress came. I had about a dozen whistleblowers. Now, this is 28 years ago in April.
I'm super proud that Smith & Wesson Firearms is a supporter of this show. I have been shooting Smith & Wesson Firearms since I was a kid. This is one of America's most patriotic companies that has been around 170 years. The Resilient Show is honored to partner with Smith & Wesson. I personally use Smith & Wesson Firearms every day for my everyday carry. I keep Smith & Wesson Firearms in my home for my home defense. When I'm out on the range practicing, it is a Smith & Wesson at the end of my grip. So check them out, and I hope you join me in carrying one of America's most iconic firearms.
On that trip, because I was still living in North Carolina, two guys approached me, and they had worked very closely with George H.W. Bush, and they said, "Do you know how dangerous this group is? We have an army of 8,000 men that have been used in moving drugs around the world, and we've already killed 2,000 of them for minor security infractions." And I said, "Yes, I realize this. I knew that in 97. And they said, "Well, this is terrible what's happening to our country." They regretted it. The other one was a senior executive with SAIC who were telling me of similar horrendous things going on under cover of national security. So we're talking about the abuse of national security authority, extraordinary technologies. And if you were to take the federal criminal penal code, I doubt there's a single law that this organization is not breaking. Now, to which I say to Ms. Bondi and Mr. Patel,
yeah,
and to the president, where's law enforcement?
Yeah, that was actually one of my next questions for you is why aren't elected officials stopping this? Like, why are they not pursuing this?
The elected officials in Congress can't. They can refer things to DOJ. They can't prosecute.
Right.
I've spoken to people in Senate and House about it. The other problem is that they're constantly gaslit by counterintelligence people who go in and say, "Oh, that's not true," right? Unfortunately, this is what's happened to Elon Musk and a few others,
making them look like kooks.
No, they just say this can't exist. We don't have it. So that's why last week on Joe Rogan, Mr. Musk said, I have an all access pass and Lockheed and Northrop doesn't have anything more advanced than my rocket. Well, it's absolutely not true. And we can prove it. But he doesn't know that. I don't think he's been read in. He should be quiet until he is read in properly. But see, the president and a lot of people around him are beginning to look into this quietly. And that's why we did the briefing document and the executive orders I sent you that are under review. There are 5 that I'm recommending. We'll go through those. But I think that the bigger problem is, how do you take on this monster, Chad? I mean, it's daunting. And I have no official standing at all. Just to be clear to everyone, I've never gotten an Indian head nickel from the U.S. government, although I paid a few $1 million in taxes. But I don't work for anybody. Yeah,
but you have been very influential. You've even this year, you've really been influential in working with Congress to get whistleblowers protection so they can safely come forward.
And that got killed, though.
Really?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Here's how this happened. So the Senate Intelligence Committee passed unanimously in 2023 the National Defense Authorization Act that had provisions for all these whistleblowers, including amnesty and protection. Went to the House. There were people in the House, powerful people, took that out. And they couldn't get it back. It passed very strongly out of the U.S. Senate, which ironically at the time was Democrat controlled. It went to the House and it got strangled in the cradle and they killed it. They took those key provisions out. Now,
is there any whistleblower protection? No.
Only what is normally afforded, but on something this extraordinary, where you have wet works engaged, wet works or assassinations. And we know who ordered that in some cases. So there's some people who need to be investigated and arrested for authorizing the murder of U.S. citizens, including
some people you've known and worked with.
Yes, extrajudicial executions.
I mean, how many people alone that you've worked with have been executed for working in this?
4.
Yeah.
And I've almost been killed a couple times.
And you have
But
you have a kill switch, right?
Yeah. I have a dead man trigger.
Yeah.
Something happens to me, the shit hit the fan. Excuse my language.
Just so those who want to kill Dr. Greer know that I'm not the withholder of that information. So
no, you're not. But
don't take me out too.
But the bigger problem is also, I think, a significant number of people in those covert programs want a way out. I remember one of the guys I met,
particularly if it becomes an integrity issue, right? When they're realizing, a lot of these guys are patriots. They join the military. They're doing right. And next thing you know, they're working in a program that they feel like their integrity has been compromised.
Yeah, 98% of people at Northrop Grumman, like my uncle, they're not part of that, or Lockheed, or the military, or the Delta Forces, or whoever. But the ones who are, here's what happens. I'll give you a great example of it. Let's say you're recruited into that, you're Delta Force, and you're 19 or whatever, right? And you're a special operator, special forces. You get little by little brought into the sphere. And by the time you rise up high enough, where you're in your 40s, 50, you then realize this is a completely illegally run operation. But they have you because you've already done so many things that are illegal. They now can say, well, you'll hang yourself as well as us, right? They're thugs. These are corporate and government thugs. So we have to give physical protection, personal protection, and legal protection that's explicit. That's one of the executive orders.
Well, you've already had almost 800 whistleblowers come forward.
Yes, there have been 100 and some. And in our archive, you want to go there, there's like 115 that are named. with their information, but the rest are blackened out. They're redacted because they don't want to be known publicly. And I keep a confidence, obviously.
Sure.
Nobody would talk to me if I didn't, right?
Of course.
So I have to be very careful. Plus, I'm a doctor. We're used to that. You can tell me anything and it stays with me. So I think that's one of the problems is that until we have those in place, that then gets connected to the next big thing on the executive order list. And that is the president has to stand up a law enforcement effort that investigates vigorously everything we already have and give them on a silver platter. We're doing this already, by the way. I am. But then authorizes a team to be stood up that are on standby. I've been meeting with them for a year and a half, who will then move on these illegal operations and black sites and illegal corporate operations and get them under control by any means necessary. I won't say more than that. But that's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, they're just going to thumb their nose at the president and the Congress.
So you're talking right now. We're talking about executive orders that are drafted by the current administration for President Trump to
Ones
sign.
I'm recommending.
So you're recommending these?
Yeah.
So,
and they've been handed to the right person. I'm not going to go into more of that. But
sure.
It's under review, and there's some very powerful people, senior in the administration, very interested in this, but they're afraid of it.
Can you list what 5 they are?
Yes, they're right here.
Yeah, let's
go through them. I mean, I mentioned 2. Okay. One was the whistleblower protection, and the other was this law enforcement. The third is an executive order requiring all these operations are fully disclosed within 6 months, or everyone involved is then prosecuted for treason, which can be executed. Right? It's treason. And the fourth is an executive order to authorize an advanced diplomatic team to make contact with these non-human extraterrestrial people and deconflict anything that's going on. And the fifth is an executive order authorizing the review and release of these advanced technologies to benefit humanity, but with the caveat, big caveat, and I think the incoming CIA director agrees with this, you cannot release the things that fly. Yet. You do not want a terrorist in Mogadishu having a platform that goes up anti-grav, boom, and is over DC in 3 or 4 minutes. That's what we're talking about. So the technologies that need to come out, though, are the ones that would eliminate poverty in the world, that would fix the beautiful created thing known as the earth and heal the oceans and the earth. We have all that. And let's keep in mind, there are only... 99.2% of the global population has no involvement in either employment or any other way with the energy sector, the current energy sector. But that 0.8% that are employed, but more importantly, the 0.0001% on the top of that, that's where your trillions are, hundreds of trillions. Power grids, oil, gas, coal, nuclear, all the solar, all the wind, geothermal, hydroelectric. It's all redundant.
And are the 0.0s, they're the ones?
Yeah. So this is why.
As center of this.
Yes. And so the president cannot, what the president could do, though, is this team could acquire those technologies. It should go under a scientific national security review, right? Like you do with science and technology for national security, and decide on the ones that are ready for prime time, that would benefit humanity, but not be something that would be used as a missile delivery system or something like that.
Sure, so yeah, of course.
It's rational. So now there are people, I have colleagues in my field who go, oh, everything should be released all at once. I said, no. The world is way behind the 8 ball. I mean, we're still blowing each other up over religious beliefs and geopolitical territories. Look at Ukraine, look at Russia. We're going to have to become nominally civilized, which we're not yet. No. Before those things can be, you go to your car dealership and get a flying thing, right?
Well, I mean, you've shown your own restraint with that because you have access to a lot of information, and you have an audience and a mechanism to do disclosures, but you're selective about what you disclose.
Yes, and
you don't disclose everything.
But you know who agrees with this 100%? The strike team that would be stood up, the special forces guys that are separated from the military that would move on these sites. And one thing I want to communicate, since this is a military show in part, if legal, constitutional U.S. law enforcement or overseas officials approach your site, put your weapon down. And do not, because you may be a young guy in your 20s, 30s, or early 40s who think that you're protecting, your OPSECs and it's a TSSCI program. It's an illegal program. So do not fire on that group. What I'm trying to back channel to a lot of these organizations is if this gets approved, which I think it should and maybe.
When we say this gets approved,
the team that would go in and get these operations under control. And they'd go to Area 51. They'd go to
under what authority complex. Though? Under the authority of the President of the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Now I think Congress could be a support role.
Sure.
But ultimately, this is the commander in chief, and it's also the top law enforcement issue.
Right. So now you have a. Obviously, the President of the United States is the authority over that, but then you have some shadow government running some program and has some E4 Air Force Security Forces guy guarding a site. There's definitely a disconnect between those two.
But no, here's what it is. Almost every one of these people who come forward, until they got to a certain point in their career, thought that the president and Congress, the oversight committees, knew about this.
Of course, you wouldn't. If you were in the military, you wouldn't.
Well, they would.
Yeah.
But here's my weird journey. I started at the top. So in 1993, I was asked to brief the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. And the FedEx I have, which I think is in the archive, it's this letter from a point of contact to the CIA director to me saying, Dr. Greer, you're going to be the first person to brief this administration, the CIA director. They've made inquiries and haven't been told anything. Honestly, I thought that was a lie. I thought, no way. This is they're just trying to pick my brain. I'm like this portable brain on two legs that walks around. But I said, no.
With 14 triple E shoes.
Yeah, I know, ridiculous. But I said, how are we going to do this? This can't be. I'm a doctor. I'm nobody. I'm a civilian who researched this, who had family involved with Northrop Grumman. My uncle very much encouraged what I was doing. He had his whole career with Northrop Grumman. But it turned out they weren't lying. The director of the CIA and the Clinton. Now, what Clinton ended up doing, based on a lot of information we gave, and we put together briefing materials, because I had made a man reached out to me named Lawrence Rockefeller. Was he a
Rockefeller?
Yeah.
Was he like a Rockefeller family?
Oh, yeah, the big Rockefeller family. It was David Rockefeller's brother. David Rockefeller was Chase Manhattan Bank. Mm-hmm. They were from the oil Rockefellers, right? So he was in his 80s. He was very supportive of this and then hosted the Clintons out at the JY Ranch and the Tetons. We worked on and put together, and some of his people helped get to Clinton a briefing document like this one, but bigger. And Clinton went through it very carefully, and he stood up what was known as Team Red. He stood up an operation to get these projects under control, and they were mostly Special Forces, Delta Force guys. I know one of them. Mm-hmm. I'll wait for him to disclose he was that guy. He was a young guy, 20 years old, 19, 20. And, but they all were either killed or absorbed into the Black Project. So he describes it this way. There's Team Blue, the legal military of the United States. Team Black, these illegal operations, and they were Team Red. And they were to penetrate and get those under control, but they were all decimated. And then George H.W. Bush pretty much threatened Clinton, and he said, uncle, and dropped it. So the rest is history. So my involvement with this goes back, and that's how I concluded. And why I say emphatically, these programs are unconstitutional and illegal. And therefore, they can't say, oh, you're violating the National Security Act here. I said, oh, really? You're committing treason and murder. So why don't you go to prison first?
That was my question. You've done a lot of disclosures.
I'm not a shy person about it.
Well, you can't be for what you do. But you've made a lot of disclosures.
Yeah.
And you've even disclosed information that is on the surface deemed top secret, classified, part of SAPs, and all this stuff. And you've disclosed it, but you've never been charged.
And here's why. Years ago, I was approached by an FBI guy who was carrying water for this corrupt group. Mm-hmm. Most FBI people aren't. It's very compartmented, very small, but very powerful. And he said that. I said, oh, really? I said, well, I can prove that your operation is treasonous and unconstitutional. And I said, it'll be a great trial. Come put the bracelets on. and we'll go and now we'll have to subpoena all these people. It'll be the court case of the millennium. Let's do it. And he like, oh my God, he said, you're crazy like a fox. I said, look, you're on the side of breaking the law. That's why these whistleblowers who approached me a couple years ago said, they said to me, thank you for what you're doing for those of us stuck on the other side. Stuck on the other side meant that they were good men and they're patriots, honestly. These guys are very patriotic, but they got pulled into this sticky wicket and they need an exit ramp. So the president needs to give them an exit ramp to do the right thing for the country. They're very patriotic.
Well, a lot of these programs, just because they have a classified stamp on them, doesn't mean if they're outside the authority of the president of the United States, outside the authority of Congress, then they're not actually classified just because they're labeled that way.
Correct. They're illegal. So that's the other crime, is the misuse and abuse of the National Security Act, right? Yeah. So otherwise, that in and of itself is a crime.
Otherwise, you would have committed a crime for disclosing, right?
Well, here's the punchline here. Anyone listening out here who have been in these projects, if you have material, if you have documents, if you have video, photographs, or your own testimony, we now have people to protect you. That's already operating at another level I don't want to talk about here. But you are not at all at risk for your national security.
Where would they go to reach out to you?
drstephen.greer.com. There's a box on the toolbar that says witnesses, military witnesses.
Okay. Yeah, because we covered that on the last episode.
We need people to come forward. The thing is, there's protection in numbers, there's strength in numbers. And I also know that they can't touch you for talking about anything related to this subject. Now, if you pull something like Edward Snowden, who exposed some NSA, he was a Booz Allen Hamilton contractor, that was known by the president and the Gang of Eight and oversight people in the Congress, you're in trouble.
Because it is legitimate, it's classified.
But it's secret, and you may have felt it was odious and invasive in terms of your privacy for people. But it was legal. That's different. Yeah. See, make a distinction here. There's a nuance. We're talking about UAP-related programs that are illegal, unconstitutional, rogue. Those have no protections under the law, and therefore you're cleared to go. Yeah. Now, actually, you know who told me to really go aggressively with that line years ago?
Who's that?
You're going to laugh because you're a Marine. He was the admiral who was J2, head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, I briefed him in 97 in his offices at the Pentagon. Now, just for people listening, J2 is head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff, would be the top person to provide intelligence materials to the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States Pentagon. And we had gotten him a document from Nellis Air Force Base that was a National Reconnaissance Office document. It's in this book, the briefing document for the president that we've redacted that anyone can buy now. Just go order it. And it's secret, but it's not been declassified. But it listed the code names and code numbers and project names as of 91. It was way back then because I met with him in 97. Based on that, he made some inquiries into some offices, landed and hit pay dirt. This is what I've been doing for Senate intelligence investigators and others. And he calls them up and goes, I'm Admiral Wilson, J2. They say, oh, yes, sir, we know who you are. He says, well, I want to be read into, which means briefed on these projects. They said, sir, you don't have a need to know. He says, damn it, how can I not have a need? I'm the head of intelligence joint staff. They said, we will not discuss this with you, and hung up on him. Then he got threatened. Then he was told they would take a star off his lapel. Now, this is Admiral Thomas Wilson. Now, at the end of that meeting, it was like a 2-3 hour, it was a long briefing. It was supposed to be 45 minutes, but he was so engaged. And I had brought Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon with me, and some other people. But what he said this, he said, look, what I've learned is that there are technologies out there that can do circles around my B-2 stealth, which is the best I have. So it's checkmate. But he also said, and I often forget this part of what he said at the very end, very poignant. He said, you tell anyone involved with this that if they want to come forward with everything they have, they can do so with a clear playing field because those operations are totally illegal. I'm this person in the Pentagon. They're lying to me and threatening me. Now let's fast forward a couple years to the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. For those of you who don't know, DIA is like the CIA. It's the top military intelligence for the whole Pentagon. The general, 3-star that I briefed, had the same thing happen. So these are data points for people to memorize. How do I make this statement emphatically that these programs are criminal, illegal, and are treasonous? Because you cannot have it both ways. You cannot be running a shadow secret government operation related to this and then willy-nilly being lying to presidents and Congress and oversight committees and also to your own senior people at the Pentagon. Now, have there been some CIA directors who knew? Yes. Have there been some DIA generals who knew? Yes. So you can't go by your rank. You have to go by whether they had a pathway in. So some are corrupt, some aren't. And this is the hardest thing for government people to get their heads around because they're thinking their high school civics book, you have the president, the Congress, and this, and blah, 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 and God is in his heaven and all is right with the world. I wish it were so. It isn't. This is a criminal, unconstitutional operation that is a threat to peace on earth and life on earth. And it by far exceeds the threat from China or Russia. The organization that has this kind of technology playing these kind of games, who also keep all the fires burning around the world, by the way, wars, endless wars. That organization having these technologies is an existential threat. So a lot of military guys who are tactical will go, well, then what do we do? If they've got this and the best thing I have is a Apache helicopter or a Humvee or a whatever it is, or F-22 or something. I said, well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are technologies that can be repurposed that can shut down those operations, but it has to do with electromagnetic field weapons. So just like they're being used to target ET craft and downing them, we're not hitting them with a missile.
No, that's, and we talked about this last time. These crash site retrievals are not always alien aircraft or extraterrestrial aircraft crashing. We are crashing them in order to capture that technology and reverse engineer it.
No, you don't go from interstellar space and can't navigate a thunderstorm in New Mexico or whatever.
You run out of gas and crashes. Yeah, but we're doing that with electromagnetic pulses. That's how we're dropping
EMP weapons that are illegal. Yes, and they have within them what's called a scalar signal. Nikola Tesla described scalar electromagnetic energy. And instead of a normal electromagnetic is a wave like this, right? Yeah. But a scalar is a point that goes out longitudinally, multiples of the speed of light. So, for example, when you detonate an atomic or nuclear bomb, everyone knows what an EMP is, electromagnetic pulse. It can take out your entire grid, right? Electric grid, if you did it at the right altitude above North America. But this scalar signal is embedded within it. And it disrupts interstellar level of communications and travel. That's why after we started detonating atomic bombs, we had all of our nuclear facilities and military facilities that had those assets being surveilled by ET craft. So there's a reason for it. Yeah. And it's a good reason because we didn't know. It's like, forgive them, they know not what they do, right? We didn't know what we had stumbled across when we detonated the first atomic bomb. But these other civilizations did, and knew how dangerous it was. So, I mean, there's tons of like eyewitness reports of extraterrestrial encounters at nuclear facilities, including shutting down the power to nuclear facilities. Correct? Like nuclear weapons facilities. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And in each of those cases, you have to do two things: is it one of ours doing a false flag? Was it one of our human one? Or is an extraterrestrial one. So no one's doing this. What I call, in medicine, we call this, I was talking to one of your assistants who would work as an aide in an emergency department. We call this your differential diagnosis. So like you have chest pain, right? Well, is that a heart attack, pleurisy, a pulmonary embolus, a dissecting thoracic aneurysm? What is it? But if you're an idiot, you see something in the sky, go, it's an alien craft. Right? And I'm going, no, it could be all kinds of things that are man-made. or even naturally occurring.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to go through this algorithm.
I get that way
analysis.
too.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when the SpaceX thing went up first time, everybody saw it first. I seen this coming through the sky, and I'm like,
yeah,
my inner warrior came out. I'm like, oh, it's on. Like I was like, we're fighting aliens. I was like so excited.
Yeah, with this big blue thing. Yeah.
And then I was so let down to see it was a SpaceX thing coming out. I was like,
Starlink.
I was like, I was born for this. This is my whole life's built up to this moment. We're going to be fighting aliens, and no.
But the thing is, the technology, they can really fake it though. I mean, now they have technologies. Everyone in the National Military Command hierarchy.
Yeah,
would think it was alien, and it's not. It's Raytheons, or it's Northrops, or it's Lockheed's. So, and by the way, these exist in Russia. We've had it confirmed from a special forces team that these objects are man-made ones are operating in Russia. I don't know about China, but I think so, and other countries. In fact, one went down in northern Iran that we had to try to swoop in and get.
So you talked a lot about the man-made UAPs and stuff like that.
We can show them.
But what's that?
We can show them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and we want to get into that. But we also talked a lot about the like when you talk about crash site retrieval and extraterrestrials.
Yes. Yep.
We talk about it like it's just normal. And I was in Washington D.C. I won't even allude to who I was talking to.
That's right.
I was in there. I was there and I actually met you there for the inauguration. I was with this gentleman, and this gentleman ran a program. He had a contract, and that contract was for crash site retrieval of downed extraterrestrial aircraft. And I was fascinated to have the opportunity to sit down with him. We sat down. We spent a lot of time together, and he's telling me about some of the projects, mainly in South America, that they were doing some crash site retrieval. And he was speaking about it so freely, and I just had to ask, like, do you have pictures? And he said, in fact, I do. And he opened up a phone, and it was like an app on his phone that it was probably to keep it secured. And he opened up these pictures, and he showed me these images of extraterrestrials alive. They were a little further away, and it looked pretty convincing to me that it was real. And then he went on to an actual excavation that they did. And I don't want to give too many details because I don't want to point to this individual, but so there was some it was very specific of where they found did this excavation, but then there was these extraterrestrial skeletons, and it was like nothing I've seen before, and there was some drawings from that area. That actually some drawings of this particular area matched a skeleton or structure would have been if that had flesh on it. And it was definitely humanoid. And it was like, again, it blew me away. Like I couldn't believe that I was looking, because I've been interested in this my whole life. I couldn't believe I was actually seeing these pictures. And then I thought back of the conversation with you of how flippant that, I mean, in a positive way, I'm not being disrespectful, how flippant you are when you talk about extraterrestrial beings.
Right.
And how it's just like, yeah, of course.
They've been around for thousands of years. I mean, remember, we've carbon dated cave drawings from 5,000 years ago in India and France that show exactly what a modern UFO with these little people outside of it. In the 1400s, there's a famous painting of Mother Mary holding Jesus. And on her left shoulder is a star symbol sort of burst. And then behind is this classic circular UFO with a blue beam coming down with people in the background going like this, looking at it.
I have to see this. I never seen it.
Yeah. I mean, my assistant can get it for you. Yeah. It's phenomenal. And it's just accepted. If you go around the world, it's relatively modern times where people go, oh no, we're the only intelligent life in the universe. You know what? The Pope, John Paul's right hand, a theologian, and he was actually a demonologist, interesting guy. He said two things to me. He said, they've always been here. And he also said, neither angels nor demons need flying saucers. The people mix that up all the time.
Yeah.
Which I think Tucker Carlson's making that mistake because he's been gaslit. And then the other thing he said is, when you start talking about, people are afraid they're a threat, he said, lower than humanity, there cannot exist in the universe. He was so funny. He was like, Monsignor Balducci. I did a great interview with him. He's passed away. He was like in his 80s back in 1999 or something. But wonderful guy, very, very spiritual guy, knew about this, knew about how ancient this is. And what you saw, absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I'm a Christian, and I had this conversation with Ken Ham. I don't know if you Ken Ham is. Ken Ham is the founder of the Creation Museum.
Oh, yeah.
Built the Ark Encounter. Incredible man. Has done such great work. I'm a big fan of him. The only point that we disagreed on, and not the disagreement, I just don't know. He's very close to the fact that Earth and humans are the center of the universe and the only creation, the only intelligent creation in the universe. And so, I not only would disagree with that, especially as a possibility, like closing that realm of possibility with the infinite, in an infinite universe, in a God that I believe is capable of creating anything and everything, including the universe.
You want Monsignor Balducci said?
What's that?
He says, God is not so stupid that he would leave all his hopes for intelligent life just in humans. He was very funny. He was a funny guy.
Yeah.
But
I just couldn't limit God that way. But now that I've seen this picture, I'm like, I went to
those are thousands of way before Christ.
I went to I mean, from my perspective, Christ is eternal. It's like the beginning and end, but the physical,
the era of his
of the life of Christ, right?
Sure, of course.
I went to Machu Picchu.
Oh yeah,
and I mean, I can't stand that Machu Picchu, and geographically look at those stones and know how far they had to come through that terrain to be perfectly set like that.
Yeah.
And the technology that existed. It's like, it's impossible for me to believe that.
Yeah. Well, the Earth holds many mysteries. There's a guy who works, he's actually CIA, but he works under contract with IT&T down near the Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, and that I've known for years. And occasionally he's one of these genius physicists and electromagnetic engineers. They will find something thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years old. That's a device or some kind of way before we had anything. And he'll be asked to find out what it did, how it worked, what it might have been used for. But he says these are confiscated frequently. They go through the system and the public never sees it. The archaeologists, anthropologists, academics, they never see this. But I've spoken to a number of people who've been, like your friend you talked to during the inauguration, that have seen this. And that doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is that, I think it's very egotistical for us to think that an infinite being is limited to one world, one planet for all life, intelligent life. On the other hand, it's not incorrect to say that the Earth is the center of the universe, because every point in space and time is the center of the universe, because it's actually infinite. So if everything goes out infinitely in all directions, you see, so yes, but so.
Yeah. It is fascinating. And I said, zero disrespect towards Ken Ham. I'm a fan of him. He's an incredible human being and a brilliant mind for us. But where I think the reason I wanted to share that story is like when I was hearing, this guy tell me about this crash site retrieval, it seemed like to me that the government contract he had to do crash site retrieval was not for research. It wasn't for the side of like the reverse engineering. It was for finding this evidence and hiding it.
Oh yes.
That seemed like to be the motive behind it.
Sure. They want to keep this secret for two reasons. One, if it gets confirmed physically at all, it opens the whole can of worms, right?
Sure.
And number two, there is a certain, I would just say, extremist element that want people to believe in false religious and spiritual traditions that have been misinterpreted, which would mean sanitizing Earth's history and human history of a lot. So those are very powerful interests, by the way. And I was told that, it's interesting that back in the 90s, some things leaked out from NASA of our imaging of Mars, and there were these ancient structures there.
Yeah, these squares.
And obelisk, a pyramid, all kinds of stuff. And I talked to Mark Carlotto at the Goddard Space Flight Center. He says, "Oh, those are absolutely real." And so I spoke about it briefly. I was asked, and I said, "Well, I was at Goddard and I saw the evidence." And I was in a restaurant in California. A man comes up to me from not Goddard, from JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs in California. And he goes, Dr. Greer, you're right about that. I said, well, that's not an operating system. It's not some current. Why can't that be disclosed? Those were millions of years ago. Millions, not thousands. And he says, well, because it would collapse some of the religious beliefs of various religions in the world, and we can't let that happen. But I said, well, the truth is divine. I mean, why would you not have, why would you want, he said, because it's not acceptable. Mm-hmm. It doesn't comport with the orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you're a scientist. So it was a very interesting insight that I had not thought of.
It is an interesting take, but not surprising. And I'll state here to people listening and maybe disagree with the fact that I'm, admitting that here that I believe in extraterrestrial life is like, there is nothing, no alien that's going to land, no ship, no blue beam project that's going to rattle my faith.
Right.
And believing that God, is the creator of the universe and created me.
And they know that too, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they very much can. They're actually very advanced spiritually, intellectually, and technologically. Yeah. I was talking to someone on your team before we started. Mm-hmm. You can't get through where we are, evolutionary, and be able to survive as a species until you become enlightened, peaceful, spiritual. And I tell people that spiritual awareness is the foundation of a golden era, golden age, because otherwise any technology that comes out that could advance humanity can be turned into a world-destroying weapon system.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
it has to be.
So there is a level of this where it's like a deep spiritual faith, but also vision of how do we get from where we are now. We've been stuck for 100 years. Into a very advanced civilization with no poverty and with a really abundant world, but not blow ourselves up, right? That's and I think other civilizations have come this way before us. There's evidence that other civilizations have gotten exactly to this, let's call it turning point. Oh, Charlie Kirk's turning point, or sort of a bifurcation in the road. We're either going to self-destruct or we're going to go on. And, it's our choice because we have free will. And made in the image of God includes free will, right? So we have the divine spark, the consciousness, the spirit, espiritos, but we have free will and we can use it for good or ill. So the question is, what are we going to use it for? So far, the malignant evil ones have been controlling this issue and holding up human evolution to the detriment of the earth and her people. So I tell people at a very deep level, I know that I'm not a theologian, but for me personally, it is a very deep spiritual question. Yeah,
it is. I mean, look, Ken Ham, for example, would say that the existence of humanity is maybe like, for him, it's 10,000 years. And a lot of people in his sphere will say 10 to 15,000 years, that's how old humans are. We're talking about a God that doesn't exist in time and space, an infinite God. So that was a long time. Infinite. The infinite time frame is a long time to be without a creation. So that's where kind of I stand with that. And I promise we'll get to this. What I'm saving this the presidential briefing because it's the most important thing to me. But I do want to ask one more thing because you on the spiritual side because you brought it up in the Bible in Ephesians 6:12. They talk about the principalities and powers. And there's a lot of Christians that have spoke about this phenomenon of extraterrestrial life, including Tucker Carlson, saying, these things that we're seeing are not UAPs. They're not man-made. They're not extraterrestrial. They're spiritual in nature. They're showing references of, and maybe, and I don't think, personally, I don't think it's necessarily maybe either or. It could be an and. But they're showing things like the orbs and things like that. And what's your take?
My take is that a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
So let me pay the courtesy of being blunt.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
If you have very little knowledge of the subject, it'd be very easy to conflate extraterrestrial with human with what I call extra-dimensional or interdimensional. And what's happening, all of the above. But the CIA has mastered the ability to pull from, let's call it a lower dimension, maybe you want to call it hell, a lower dimension, and bring that stuff right into this dimension.
The spiritual realm. I would say.
A lower, higher, whatever it is. You know, I mean, when you pass away, you ascend to the level of your spiritual attainment at the time of your death, and whether you have, imagine having the ability to stage things that mimic extraterrestrial, but it's actually extra dimensional. And it is scary, and it is, some would call demonic, but it's not ET. So you have three things going on. You have extraterrestrial, you have man-made craft and other beings or fake, and then you have this extra-dimensional phenomenon, which is real. Because back in '95, I think it was, I wrote a paper called ETs and the New Cosmology, sort of understand this divine cosmology and the order of the cosmos. But the problem is, you know, if you're a hammer, the whole world is a nail. Right? And so let's say you have a religious orientation, and you don't have enough of the information, and there's some really creepy, spooky things going on, it's then easy to say, well, the aliens are agents of Satan or something. But they're confusing. I talked to Charlie Kirk about this on his podcast in Phoenix right before Christmas when the president was there. And I think that we have to be careful that we don't confuse what has already deliberately been put out there to obfuscate the truth. So what these guys are, the covert programs are like magicians. And I liken it to that old guy in The Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, pulling all the levers, scaling the heck out of Dorothy and the Scarecrow. They're pulling these levers and that's evil, because they're deceptive. The evil is deceptive and untruthful. And they're doing this not only to gaslight religious people, but political leaders and scientific leaders. So, you know, they leave no stone unturned. And so one of the problems is, give you a good example. Everyone's heard of Skinwalker Ranch. That's not extraterrestrial. That's extra dimensional. And the current phenomenon there was instigated by a covert group that was a cutout of CIA operatives, and I know who they are, through the billionaire Robert Bigelow, who I'd met at the Rockefeller Ranch in September 1993. So all the phenomenon going at the Skinwalker Ranch is not extraterrestrial. It's augmented, let's call it, or induced extra-dimensional by covert black projects. Same thing with out here in near Sedona, the Bradshaw Ranch. I've had colleagues, it's an alien underground base. It's a black site. We know when they took it over, how they took it over, why they took it over. I've had a team go up there and spy down on from a mountain above and seen guys with machine guns and all in black guarding the place. But all kinds of creepy, weird phenomenon comes out of there. Now, and I've observed that. Now, it's not extraterrestrial, but it's this other thing. But what everyone's doing, they're taking three categories of things: extraterrestrial, man-made craft and beings, and this extra-dimensional weird stuff, let's call it, and they're putting it all together.
And it's separate.
And it's not helpful, because what happens then, that's how you then get totally misled. So Mr. Carlson's had that happen to him, and I see it happen to people in Congress. So what I try to bring is some sort of clarity to this, but with proof and evidence of it. It's like, no, here's what it is, right? Because otherwise, you know, you're in the wilderness. It's like flying in a fog in an aircraft with no, sensors and hitting the side of a mountain. Everyone's flying into the side of the mountain of this big deception that's been created.
Well, if you don't understand something, I was talking to Pastor Joby Martin, a friend of mine, the other day, and we were talking about something along the lines of these topics. We were both about to fly, and you flew here. He's like, 200 years ago, if we would have flew in an airplane across the country like we're doing today, we would have landed and we would have told people about it. They would have tied us to a stake and burned us alive. Absolutely. With witchcraft, right? So we learn things and change, and we look at things different. But I'm a believer, and he said, and Pastor Joby said this, I'm a seeker of truth, and I believe this. I believe that, and I believe this as a Christian. I believe that if you seek truth, and you're truly in a passionate goal to seek truth, and that's what your motivation is, you're always going to land on Jesus, because Jesus is truth, right? So for me, I'm not scared to ask questions, seek truth. I personally believe that these are three separate things. I believe that there's the UAP, man-made stuff. I believe that there's an extraterrestrial piece to it, but I also believe that there's the interdimensional piece for me, from what I've seen so far, and I'm not an expert in it. I do believe there is a spiritual realm, so I don't know where the separation of there is. And I'm kind of weary of the spiritual realm because I do believe that the spiritual realm is a dangerous place.
Yep. And it is. And especially here's where it gets even more confusing. If I don't want to lose your audience here.
I'm super interested in it.
Okay. So imagine going from the Andromeda galaxy, 2.5 million light years from here. At speed of light, it takes you 2.5 million years. That's what a light year is. It's the distance light goes at 186 miles every second for that 2.5 million years. So the light that we see from Andromeda is 2.5 million years old.
Andromeda is a star?
It's a galaxy.
A galaxy.
It's our closest galaxy.
Okay.
So my group has had an encounter, a meeting with a ET from Andromeda. She took the picture. My assistant took a picture of it.
I seen this picture.
Cool.
This the picture you showed me?
Yeah, one of them.
Okay.
So now, if you're going in SpaceX's rocket, it'd take you a billion years to get there. Even at the speed of light, which you can't do, because as you approach the speed of light, Einstein was correct. You take on infinite mass. As you approach the speed of light, a solid object. So how are you getting from A to B? You're dropping out of linear space-time. And as you do, you're transdimensional. So some of the phenomena that's actually extraterrestrial on its face is very confusing with interdimensional or extradimensional, and with covert CIA and some of the aerospace programs. So this is where unpacking this.
So someone like me might have mentioned, say that's spiritual realm. But
it may not have been.
Where it may not have been, right?
You have to have enough information, and you have to have an operating, what I call differential diagnosis. You need to have enough detailed information to make that distinction. But see, what I have found when I've met with members of Congress and White House folks over the years and met Pentagon, they don't, it's a massive, huge, even if they know the tip of that iceberg, it's this vast. So expertise on this is very important if you're going to go operational, like what we're recommending here. And by the way, in the first couple of pages on here, the president's briefing document and what this.
Let's get into it. Let's jump into it.
I'll just hold it up.
I want to introduce this is so Dr. Greer, and a return reminder, and I stand corrected. You have briefed every president since Bill Clinton,
either indirectly or through his senior people.
Provided a briefing.
Yes,
and so this is the one that you've done
for 47.
For 47.
Yeah,
and so,
but it's redacted. Obviously, they're sensitive.
But his isn't redacted. Like his is like this is his, and you redacted it for the public.
Yeah, and it has select documents, crash retrievals, witness testimony. It has everything in here. It has the map, all the black sites. So this
available. Anyone can get it.
Yeah, it just as of this week became available.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very important that people study this on their own and then maybe get a copy. There's a hard and soft copy. I apologize we didn't have the hard to give you, but I'll sign it for you. And then the other one, the reason this is important is that everyone should send one of these to their member of Congress. There's 2 senators and their member of Congress. They should. Because, there needs to be a comprehensive amount of information that these lawmakers have. Because I think next year or two, all this is going to come out. There's a building mass of whistleblowers who are currently operational that want to come forward.
Yeah.
And they're holding a lot of evidence, which we thought would come out before the inauguration, but they were convinced to slow walk it because of blowback. For one thing, they were afraid of the, risk to their families, but also legally, because technically you can tell them that the operation they're in is illegal and they know it is, but they still know that the Justice Department and the Military Criminal Investigative Division can go after you even if you're innocent. Lawfare, right? So they're vulnerable. So there needs to be an explicit, and that's in here, these recommended executive orders, but so is all the evidence. So I'll let you can peruse that. And I thought a pen was up here, but we lost it. I was going to sign it. We'll do it sometime.
Yeah, we'll get it after.
So
get pictures and illustrations in here.
Oh, it has everything. select government documents. That NRO document, National Reconnaissance Office from Area 51, that's in there.
Maps of black sites.
Oh, I think the memo about why they killed and who killed Marilyn Monroe is in there. Jack Kennedy was killed over this issue, 100%. President of the United States, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, how much RFK Jr. knows that, and his.
How much of this? Tons of government documents in here. How much do you think that this transnational organization, these criminals, are involved with the suppression of this Epstein list?
Well, you know, there's an intersectionality across all of this. I was talking to, I want to say a very highly placed general who's also been in the NI office in the past. And in fact, I was at Mar-a-Lago with him a few weeks ago. And he very specifically is looking into other corrupt issues like that. And he was never read into this, but he's heard rumblings. And I said, yes, this is the crown jewel atop all that rot.
Right.
And, you know, I tell, you know, the salacious stuff about Epstein, to me, that's like a gnat in front of the sun. I mean, it's
well, it was an extorting tool.
Exactly. And I will just say this. There's someone very senior in national security currently that got involved with that. And that's how they're blackmailing that person to keep this secret about UAP secret.
Yeah, I mean Epstein was. This wasn't just people having fun with molesting.
Yes.
Yeah, this wasn't just pedophilia. People having fun molesting children. This was a extortion tool to compromise world leaders, to control and compromise world leaders, and that's the secrecy behind.
But so there are two big things that happen: threats and blackmail, which I receive. I just this past week got a whole bunch of threats. So everything was hacked into. They were going to had the addresses of people very close in my family that they were going to intimidate. Death threats. I get this periodically, all hacked in, illegal. So I tell these people with law enforcement, I said, well, you know, here's a law that was just broken. Run this to ground, right? You can't hack into someone's private phone. I'm a private civilian. Now, the other thing that happens is offers of huge amounts of power or position. So, you know, if you say, play along with this and we'll make you rich or we'll make you famous or what have you. And before we started, I was telling one of your friends that in 1992, the head of guy who had been head of Army intelligence and General Stubblebine offered me $2 billion. And that was 33 years. In May, it'll be 33 years. And to basically get on board with his operation and be an asset. And it was a serious offer. Patrick David, it couldn't have been a real, I said, no, it was. Because it was after the Soviet Union had collapsed.
Were you tempted at all?
And no, nope, never even had a thought.
I had to ask.
Nope.
Yeah.
You know, look, I grew up.
It's a lot of money.
I grew up very poor in the South in a rundown shack with no heat, no air conditioning. You know, we were just white trash. You know, I can say that. You can't.
Yeah. But actually, I can say it too because I was poor. I didn't know I was poor. But
we're a total redneck. Yeah. But my parents were very smart. But we were very, very poor. We didn't even have heat in the house. We had a little kerosene heater. And I grew up in that setting. And so having struggled and I put myself through the last year of high school, college, and medical school. So I'm not rich, but I'm well off enough that I turned to the general. I said, I don't need your money. I have a very simple life. I can live on very little. And I said, go pound salt. I said, just get out of here. But then he tried to convince my wife. And no one approaches my wife. We're 46 years married this year. I said, no, don't do that. So it'll be the last thing you do. And then they started with all the blackmail and the threats and stuff. So I've been living that life of aggravation and whatever since 91, 92. But this is what happens. How many people, okay, they say, on the one hand, we'll give you this great position, corporate or government, and you'll have a lot of money. On the other hand, if you don't, we're going to come after you like a pack of junkyard dogs, right?
Just try to destroy you.
And destroy you. And they can. They can set up criminal events. They can put false docs. They can create anything. And with AI, they can create anything. Let me give you an example. One of the whistleblowers in here, this book. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one that's really cool.
So this is the second book, Disclosure.
Yeah, this just came out this week too. And it's called Disclosure and Illustrated History. So what it is, it's a coffee table book with all these great illustrations. Every case in here, crash retrieval and major cases, as well as new whistleblowers, are illustrated. And they're, so on one page, you'll see, I'll just go to the one I have marked because I want to talk, because this is in your neighborhood here. What I'm about to show you.
Okay.
This is down the road, Brabe. This dumb machine is in the way. So you see on one side, you'll see an illustration,
right,
and on the other, a summary. Oh, and so there are 200 and some pages of this, and then my commentary, if there is one. Yeah. So that is what is available. This is the coffee hardcover. You can get it soft cover. It's less expensive. And this is available to anybody. Now, what is this case, y'all? You know, you can zoom in on this, or you can do it later.
Yeah.
This is the Cash Landrum case. Happened 1 hour southeast of here. And it's when, and the trajectory came right over this area. I bet there's radioactive stuff out here. So here's what happened. In early 90s, there was a mom and her sister and a 5-year-old boy in the back seat driving along a highway outside Dayton, Texas, which is northeast of Houston. And this weird object comes out of the sky like this. Here it is. Mm-hmm. And here it goes, comes down, and it's spewing this stuff. And their car gets covered, and they get all covered with radioactive waste. So they were critically injured in the hospital.
Oh, so this wasn't intentional. This was
a malfunction.
Right.
Now, everyone was allowed to think, oh, it was an alien spaceship. Half true. So the principal investigator of this incident has come clean and is a whistleblower. And what he said to us, and he's named in here, is that was an ET craft. They couldn't figure out how to get the energy system to crank up. So they put a nuclear power plant on that thing and got it to fly. And there were 4 human pilots on board. And it malfunctioned over that area of Texas. It was coming out of Area 51, Nellis. And it spewed these people. Now, this is all documented in court documents, hospital records, everything, this case. These are all solid cases. So those people could never get their day in court because the main U.S. government, the legal government, said, we don't know anything about this. And they weren't lying. They didn't, right? And a FOIA request is not going to reveal something like this. Freedom of information, that's a joke. I mean, there's nothing important accessible to a FOIA clearance officer, period. Or I'm very skeptical that the JFK FBI files will be of any consequence either, because that stuff is in a parallel universe that I don't think the president and Ms. Bondi and Kash Patel have access to. But we can get them access. Now, here's the problem. Everyone thought this was, these poor people were like irradiated. No, it was a malfunction. It was stupid. We put one of these nuclear portable plants. It ruptured, something malfunctioned. It was coming down. It eventually went from there straight over where we're sitting over to Fort Hood, which is now called something else. But you know where Fort Hood is.
They gave them all the names back.
Oh, good. Well, they're Fort Hood.
Yeah.
And from there, we don't know what happened to it.
Shout out to Pete Hegseth for getting those names back.
Yeah. Yes, he did. But you can't, they couldn't make it all the way back to Nellis. It was pretty far, right? So those events happen, and often the public will think it was extraterrestrial, but maybe it's something that was ET that we're trying to get work. And then we put a nuclear power plant on it. Now, I have many cases like that as well. So this book is like, every page is like that. There's a big illustration and a write-up. So that's for you also.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So disclosure and the Disclosure Project briefing document for the president. both of those are available, and they can get them anywhere books are sold, or go to your website?
No, just go to our website. We're just doing these kind of print on demand.
And all the website and links will be in our show notes below. So just go down below and you can just click on them to get these copies.
My goal is to put everything we have that I can without violating a confidence available to the public.
That should be,
right. Which is what I mean. That's the whole point. I'm head of the Disclosure Project, so we don't keep secrets unless I have to, because it's protecting somebody, right? Method, sources, names,
So, Dr. Greer, what's the end game? Like, what's the end game for all this? Where do you see this?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the end game, I think, needs to be this president. I don't think we'll have another president that'll have an opportunity to deal with this. Okay, I'm just telling you that. I think it's going to come out one way or another. Now, what I've said to people very close to the president is that if this is mismanaged, which currently it will be, that he doesn't have enough information yet. If this is mismanaged, Pete isn't read into this. There's only one person in that system that I trust who knows a fair amount about this, and that's Amaryllis Kennedy. Amaryllis Kennedy is on the White House Intelligence Advisory Group for the president. And she's also very much attached to Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. I've been speaking with her for a few years. She very much is informed. But the new DNI, Ms. Gabbard, to my knowledge, Kash Patel has no in-depth knowledge of this. I'm quite sure Mr. Hegseth doesn't. I know people close to the president. He doesn't. Vance, to my knowledge, doesn't. And on and on. Now, whether the National Security Advisor, Waltz, has gotten any information, I don't know. But what I know has to happen is that a very concerted study group and task force needs to be put together, get to the bottom of this, enact those executive orders, and then stand up law enforcement. Because law enforcement is the only way you're going to fix this here and overseas. Because you're not going to be able to just say, hey, pretty please, start obeying the law, And by the way, I would argue, why in the world do we have an FBI if murder, treason, trillions of dollars in corruption and embezzlement, insubordination, sedition, abductions, kidnapping, all of that they get a free pass on? Why? Because they're powerful?
Right.
No.
Two tiers.
Okay, so this is where we do have to grow a pair, excuse my language. And it isn't taken on what you're hearing in the media now that they're trying to take on about deep state. I would say that's 0.01% of anything significant. And so I'm being very blunt here. I've been doing this a long time. I'll be 70 in June. I'm sort of burned out a little bit. My friends and family will say, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
When did you get burned out on this? I said July of 94. I swore I would drop this in July of 94.
Yeah. Well, it's 2025.
I know. I lost track of time.
This is 300 pages. So the chances of, President Trump reading 300 pages, we know is slim. Is there a summary executive summary that you put together?
Yeah. And that's the first few pages, first 8 pages. Okay. And then there's a 1-pager for the president and his people. And they have that. Okay. So, and it 1 page, because really, I get this. When my people say this, I said, boil it down to 3 sentences. I'm too busy. Right. So I get it. When you're doing things with someone like that, or even a senior senator, you have to make it as, now their staffers should read it. Right.
They're the ones that brief them.
Yeah. But here's the problem with the Congress. 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, 3 plus, they were going to stand up a clandestine, classified group to study this issue based on our archive, which at that time we had not digitized. Now it is. You can everyone can see it, but it would be the unredacted version. But they never got the funding. Here's the problem: money. So the House Oversight Committee, with their new task force with Luna, I've met with Luna and others, and Burchett, they don't have the money or staff to do any expertise on this. So they keep getting gaslit by disinformation specialists like Gallaudet, Admiral Gallaudet, or Luis Elizondo. These are all professional people, part of that organization. They don't know that.
That's just, I don't know these individuals, so I can't say that. I have to trust your word for it. And you do, and I trust you. So in general, are there people like paid to go out and just do media like you're doing right now for disinformation.
Of course.
That's their job.
9 out of 10.
Okay.
Honestly. And also, most of the major news shows are not allowed to have anyone who actually has this kind of information.
Right.
They'll have people, well, we don't know, and we saw a light in the sky, or it's nothing, or
and they're
the danger here's the danger, is that if those people, I know that I mentioned this briefly to Don Jr. A couple months ago, if people at that level have access to presidential circles, and they provide false information and keep gaslighting them, we're not going to get out of the 1950s.
Yeah.
So at a certain,
you and I text regularly, and you've told me that several times. Like this person's intentionally given disinformation to Sebastian Gorka, who I'm friends with, Dr. Gorka, to Elon Musk, and to all these heads of state.
Sure.
Because they're taking him off course intentionally.
Well, yeah. And in September, I was in the UK talking to a gentleman who is very high up, extremely high up, who's on our team, who I brought to Senate Intelligence this past fall. And he knows I can't say who, a prime minister who, when they started looking into this in the UK, they threatened to kill him and his entire family. And he knows this family personally. When I say these are thugs who absolutely have no regard for human decency and the law, that are running this. Now, there are many good people in the system, though. You know, if you're just a worker bee at these black sites, covert sites out in the desert, you're there and you don't know. You're not making these big decisions. But the ones up near the top, for example, there's a man who is the former chairman of a Fortune 50 company, that's all I'll say, who wants to come forward. As soon as he reached out to us, boom, he got threatened to have his entire family killed. Wet works. But he's someone who needs physical and legal, because he knows he did some very illegal things. But he has the documents. He has the proof of, he said the whole world could have free energy for decades, quote unquote. And look at the state of the world.
Everyone too, not just
everyone.
Not just the privileged.
Oh no! If you look at if you're a missionary to Africa, or you go to Brazil, or the poverty is unbelievable. 3 billion people on Earth don't even have energy to cook their food. That's why they're chopping down forests and creating deserts. But we can do better than that. If you care about humanity and really a golden age, you've got to deal with this issue, because the technology is behind what they're keeping secret. That's one of the twin pillars, the science and technology part, and the false flag, the fake alien threat. That's what they've been running with since 53, 54.
Yeah. One more question on that. Can we get a copy of that one-pager executive, that's the executive brief for the president?
I'd have to redact some of it for you.
Yeah, we'd love to have that in the redacted version of it to show to our folks. So last question, unless you have more.
There's always more.
I know you do. We can even do it again. But last question is to the audience listening. What can the everyday person do with this information you provided? Like you provided a lot of information, and it's mind blowing to me every time. I love sitting down and talking with you. But what action steps could the listeners take?
Here's something everyone can do.
Okay.
Everyone can write to their 2 senators or a member of Congress and send them the briefing document, or send them the ebook version. We have it in ebook. Both of them are in ebook, if you don't want to, pay for the physical book.
Okay.
Because they're kind of expensive, because they're like one-off printing.
It's a manual, yeah.
And it's a manual, and it has a huge amount of color plates, and those are expensive to do. But everyone can do that and should. Number 2, network this. If you're from a military family or corporate or intelligence, if you network, it's like 6 degrees of separation. Almost all of our whistleblowers, 760 some, have come through this sort of networking. And I know that after I was on the Sean Ryan show the first time, there was a whole tranche of a couple dozen new whistleblowers that came forward. So a show like yours is important because you're military or former military. A lot of
huge
those
military
folks,
audience,
and you have a big military audience. So people need to take the initiative and do it knowing that we're going to protect you. No one at this point on our team's been killed recently, but also we're going to set up the means for you to provide it to us anonymously if you need to. and or to law enforcement. Now, here's the other thing. We need people to come forward with documents, evidence, detailed information who have been or are in those programs, because being stood up, when I get back, I'm meeting with a senior, let's just say a cutout for folks who can fix this, right? It's enough. That's probably all I should say. But the more detailed information we have, the better. For example, we have a man who had been at some of these black sites out in the desert, and he knew where the entry point was to the underground base, a STIF, subterranean facility, they're called. And so that kind of information is important tactically if you're actually going to ever get these under control, because it's a big mistake to think. I mean, the senior investigators, Senate Intelligence, Armed Services, Pentagon people I've met with, people who are coming in the new administration, they don't have any of that information. I have a lot. I don't have everything. And we need more. And we need people to be coming forward now also with documents, video, photos, like you saw from that gentleman in South America. But those can be put in a system that where you can protect it, but also get it to the president and get it to the chief oversight people, because that's what they're wanting.
Yeah.
You know, now I know people holding that who were going to come forward before the inauguration, and they said, we've been encouraged, since we're going to come out and unmask ourselves, you know, we're not going to release everything because we've been told that'd be too catastrophic. So I think they're wanting to do this over the next year, year and a half, right? But the information doesn't get you anything, Chad. I mean, if you don't act on the intelligence, it's not actionable intelligence unless you act on it.
Right.
So you have to act on it, which means you're going to have this team, and they're wonderful men. I mean, I think most of them are all been Green Berets and all special forces who are very willing to risk everything to get this resolved for our country. And they're true heroes. I mean, they're amazing men. And we need to make that happen by having people write to the president and write to your Congress. I mean, we're a democracy. You need to hear your voices.
Yeah. Okay.
But you need to research and help network this. And the other thing you can do is just network to your social media what we're doing. Because I'm retired from medicine. We live on donations. Like the archive, you can donate to it. It's the Disclosure Project, DPIarchive.com. And there's no charge to be in there, but it's expensive. We spent several $100,000 to put it together. And then there's monthly costs for that bandwidth in the cloud, because it's a huge amount of information.
You're a nonprofit, right? So people could donate.
We were. The IRS was weaponized against us.
Okay.
Here's a great story. And you know what they did? It was a trick. They had an Army intelligence guy suddenly become a IRS auditor, tore us apart. And basically what they said was, anything that you've expensed through the nonprofit, we have to know who and where you were, which meant I would have had to disclose to this guy on a fishing expedition as a knock, a cutout for this cabal working in the IRS of who I met with, who I've been briefing, where they were located. I said, I'm not going to do that. So they were trying to, shake me down for like $375,000. My tax attorney made it go away, but that's when I said, I'm done with the nonprofit on this. So we're actually like Newman's Own. We're like an institute LLC, but we're not touching the nonprofit sector because we've already been had it weaponized against us.
Yeah, I would say I don't blame you.
Oh my God! I mean, because they're giving you a tax benefit, right? Yeah. So then they say they're entitled.
Well, yes, it's actually a government entity that they're trusting you to manage.
Yes,
I mean, that's what 501c3 is. Yeah.
See, I've learned to appreciate my liberties and freedom, and a nonprofit doesn't do it. So no, it's not tax deductible. But people, it's worth supporting. Yeah. Look, for those who actually want to share this and can't share this because for financial reasons, you could also share Dr. Greer's website. He has a website with tons of documents and it's all free.
The whole archives is all free. You could share that as well. But this is a cause to get behind. Man, I couldn't imagine what would happen if every congressman and senator had a copy of this and actually their aides read it.
Yes.
And so let's get behind Dr. Greer and getting this stuff disclosed and at least on the table for people that we've elected in office and people that are the people we elected in office have appointed people that need to be informed so they can make the right decisions.
Well, let's pretend. I mean, we say we live in a democratic republic.
Right.
Let's act like it. I mean, we need to exercise our democracy. And they need. I had many members of Congress say to me, "We need to hear from our constituents."
A constitutional republic requires the citizens to participate.
Yep,
that's how it's set up.
It devolves into just a empty shell.
Totalitarianism will thrive if we don't. So
here's
up.
the freedom. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Greer, I'm always a pleasure to sit with you.
Thank you.
I know we're gonna have we can't shoot today because I just had eye surgery.
I know, that's fine.
Twice in a row we missed shooting, but we're going to have some really good food tonight.
Great.
And,
Great.
But I want to thank our sponsors for making this happen. Smith Wesson Firearms, which you got a gun.
Got a great
Smith
one.
Wesson Firearm.
Still have to learn how to use it.
Yeah, I know. I gotta get out and shoot with you. Vortex Optics, Gators Eyewear, Allied Wealth Management. We have BioPro supplements and BioAccelerator, which is stem cell clinic down in Medellin, Colombia.
Oh, great.
And some holy water. Seeing you drinking holy water.
I have.
Yeah,
I feel blessed already.
In case we manifested any demonic spirits talking to that spiritual realm, but we're quenching our thirst with holy water. We have some great sponsors that make this show happen.
We'll focus on the angelic and celestial spiritual realm.
Exactly. Yeah, there's two sides of it.
Yeah.
So, and man, I'm looking right now. Our team did a awesome. Every guest in studio here gets a custom background in this.
Oh, really? I love this.
Yeah. So this background is just for you.
Oh, it's beautiful. Good work.
Yeah, that's perfect.
You have a great team.
Thanks so much, Dr. Greer.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, we'll see you next week. But if you have not yet, please like, comment, subscribe. If you have not subscribe, and then go to our Patreon and in the caption notes below, join our Patreon family. We cannot do this without you. We love you guys. So thankful for you. And we're going to have some amazing Patreon stuff behind the scenes because I got some other questions that we were talking to Dr. Greer about behind the scenes. And also on our Patreon, we're going to get that letter that Dr. Greer has, the executive summary for the president. He's going to redact a few things before we'll get it up there on the Patreon for you to check it out. God bless. Till next week, stay resilient. Hey, what's up, Resilient family? I am so grateful for each of you who tune in every week to hear our episodes. We have such incredible guests and topics that I am passionate about, our team's passionate about, and we could not do it without you. So we're thankful for you. We love you. We appreciate you locking arms with us to be more informed, to become a more resilient community. And I want to invite you to become a tighter part of that community by joining us on Patreon. If you go to our show notes below, you can click the link and get dialed into our Patreon and get extra content weekly. You can join for $15 a month and get behind the scenes footage, get closer access to me. I have monthly Zooms that I'll be doing with some members of the community. And so we'd love to get more involved. Again, go below in the show notes and click the link and join today.